In 2017, as the policy of a facilitating government was promoted, the Vietnamese business community in general and the startups community in particular witnessed positive changes and bright prospects. The society's interest in startup, particularly state management over startups, is growing bigger. The startup community is playing more and more important roles in boosting economic development and innovation in doing business. In this week's episode of Bizline, we will spend time analyzing recent achievements and limitations of the Vietnamese startup community.
Vietnam's startup ecosystem has continuously grown in recent years, with 2017 witnessing a boom as the government promoted the Startup Nation scheme. Foreign investors buying stocks of Vietnamese startup and fundraising rounds worth millions of dollars made huge waves. Notably, the e-commerce company Tiki confirmed it had received an investment of around $44 million from JD.com, one of China's e-commerce giants. Last September, Sea, or Southeast Asia's most valuable startup, acquired an 82% holding in Foodie, one of the most popular gourmet media platforms in Vietnam, for around $64 million. On the opposite spectrum, Joomla, a Vietnamese web template developer, acquired the Poland-based long-standing opponent Gavik.com. The Vietnamese startup ecosystem has been receiving more and more support, which can be seen in the government's favorable policies and the establishment of incubators and accelerators in a number of localities.
And joining our Bizline this week is Mr. Han Ngoc Tuấn Linh, CEO and co-founder of Vietnam Silicon Valley Accelerator, a well-known startup incubator in Vietnam, to give us an insight into the startup community in Vietnam. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, first of all, can you give us an overview of the recent development in the Vietnamese startup community over the last few years?
We started out not as an accelerators, but we actually started out as a team who do a consulting project for the government. I think that was the first instance when the government really look at startups and they think in the future startup can play a big role in economic development for Vietnam. And over the past few years, I think the biggest change is in the government perceive of startup communities. In the past 2 years, I see a lot of founders, but not young first-time founders, but rather people who are very experienced. They have spent about 10 years, 15 years develop products for other companies. And they think that, okay, so I spent enough time developing products, now I can go out with my own team and develop my own startups. They have very high technical skills. And some of the best startups that we invest in are of the founders who come from these backgrounds. So when they move out to a startup, sometimes they work even harder than young founders. They work more professionals. They have more connections to sell their product to the market. Another positive trend is a lot of people start talking about investing for startup is a viable investment. So the investor is still in the stage where they try to understand how to invest in startup and not lose money. But over time, I think this year or next year, they will be more comfortable to making the investment decisions. In the countries around the regions like Singapore and Malaysia, the government and also the investor, they are invest heavily into startups. And these investors, they also look at Vietnamese startup, but they will take a long time to get familiar with the market before comfortable to investing into the companies in Vietnam.
What do you think about the attractiveness of the Vietnamese startup community in calling for investment, especially like foreign investment?
We started invest in 2014, and up until last year, our money to invest into startups come from local investors. But last year, Lotte accelerators from Lotte Group, they decided to invest with VSV accelerators for Vietnamese startup, and that is a very big signal for us that the foreign funds now they are comfortable to work with local investors to invest for startup. In the past, we have IDG Ventures or Cyber Asian Ventures who come into Vietnam and also investing for startups, but that is not a cooperation between a Vietnamese investors and a foreign international investors. but mostly the international investors see the opportunities and come to Vietnam and invest. Just recently, we have a demo day for our startup, and the CEO of Lotte Accelerator came to Vietnam. He have been to Israel, to Singapore, to many other countries, and he invests in many startups and sit in many demo days. And what he sees is that the quality of startup at demo days, the Vietnamese founder is on a comparable qualities with every others founders in every other countries.
BoxMe is a startup that provides cross-border order fulfillment and logistics services. Despite starting as a domestic business, this startup soon realized the importance of expanding into foreign markets and has entered 4 ASEAN countries and the United States.
Chúng tôi thấy việc nào? Tại sao chúng ta cũng có công nghệ, chúng ta có công nghệ còn tốt hơn các nước trong khu vực. Chúng ta chỉ thiếu một cái đấy là quyết tâm toàn cầu hóa. Thì chúng tôi mới thấy được là nếu mà chúng tôi làm thì chúng tôi cũng không sợ, cũng không thua kém gì các đồng nghiệp trong khu vực.
As one of the 10 startups with the most potential at the Startup Festival 2016, held by the Ministry of Science and Technology, this software company provides hotel management and marketing technology solutions. It has set foot in a number of Southeast Asian markets since late 2017.
Các đối thủ chính ở ezCloud ở Việt Nam thì vẫn là các đối thủ đến từ châu Âu và những nước có nền công nghệ rất phát triển như là Ấn Độ hay là Úc. Và sang Thái Lan thì chúng tôi cũng phải chiến đấu với các đối thủ như vậy.
Most startups like ezCloud and BoxMe offer internet-based products and services, which allow them to promote cross-border businesses. However, these two businesses are only among the few Vietnamese startups who are able to enter regional markets, not even to mention global ones. Meanwhile, going global has become a worldwide trend in the field of startups for several years. Some notable examples are Grab, Uber, or Airbnb.
Bắt đầu có thể là Việt Nam, nhưng thị trường tương lai sẽ phải là ít nhất là phải là thị trường tại khu vực Đông Nam Á. Bởi vì nếu mà chúng ta cái sản phẩm dịch vụ trong cái thế giới toàn cầu hóa rất mạnh mẽ hiện nay, đặc biệt là trong cái ngành công nghiệp công nghệ thông tin, nếu chúng ta không có khả năng toàn cầu hóa sớm hoặc muộn thì chúng ta cũng sẽ bị các doanh nghiệp khác đã toàn cầu hóa thành công, đã khu vực hóa thành công sẽ tiêu diệt.
According to several startups, moving into foreign markets is similar to starting their businesses all over again. No matter how successful they are in the domestic market, their brand names, customers, networks, and market knowledge are limited when it comes to new markets.
Đối với các startup nhỏ thì cái quan trọng nhất, cái nguồn lực quan trọng nhất đó sẽ là nguồn nhân lực. Chúng ta nên nếu mà để mà có thể có khả năng toàn cầu hóa, chúng ta cần phải có một cái nguồn nhân lực có chất lượng cao, đã được đào tạo bài bản tại các cái môi trường mà có ngoại ngữ tốt, đã có kinh nghiệm làm việc trước tại các cái công ty mà đã có hoạt động tại khu vực.
Now, some people think that the Vietnamese startup community still lack major business that are able to reach regional and international markets. What is your take on this?
I think yes, the number of Vietnamese companies that aim at the regional market or the global market is not high. It's very low. But I don't think it is about the size of the startup or the ability of the founders. But I think it's just the way of thinking for the founders. Even just inside the Vietnamese market, we invest for startup in Da Nang, we invest for startup in Ho Chi Minh City, we invest for startup in Hanoi. And all the time we see that if the founders is born in Ho Chi Minh City or is living in Ho Chi Minh City, they will want to have their startup in Ho Chi Minh City and explore that market. If the founders in Hanoi, they want to explore Hanoi.
Can we talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of Vietnamese startups in terms of increasing their regional or even global reach?
Something very simple like the language barriers sometimes play a very big role. So for a startup that we invest in, one of the requirements is they have to be able to communicate in English, because for that companies to still growing quickly, they will need more investment at bigger rounds. And the investment from bigger rounds come from venture capitals, and Vietnam doesn't have many venture capitals that is locally here in Vietnam. A lot of venture capitals that we talk to, they always express that one of the key market that they want to invest to is Vietnam. But very few of them, I think, are actually spending enough time to get to know the Vietnam market and Vietnamese startup, because it's just easier for them to look at market like Malaysia and Singapore and Philippines. At least they can communicate effectively with investors and its startup there. In terms of technical ability to actually build a technology product, Vietnam is very strong. We work with people from Australia, people from UK, US. It's like common knowledge that Vietnamese have a lot of good technical founders. Another one is in terms of cost level for the companies in Vietnam. Even just compare with other countries in the regions, we still have much lower costs. That means with the same amount of investment, if we invest for a Vietnamese startup, that amount can get the company further compared to if we invest in a country like Singapore or Malaysia.
Now, some experts said that the biggest weakness for Vietnamese startup community is the lack of innovation and core technology, as many of them rely on imported technology that has been successful in other countries. Is that true? And what is your take on that?
You don't always have to work on a most advanced technologies to be able to successful, because investing in startup and building a startup is more about serving an underserved market. Currently, Vietnam is not on the same level as developed countries. Things that people in the UK or in the US have access to, a lot of things has become a commodity for them, are still new things in Vietnam. So even for the startup that bring technologies from other countries to Vietnam and build business based on that, as long as it benefits the society, benefit the customers, as long as the customer willing to pay, and as long as the market size is big enough for the company to grow, that is still a good companies. In Vietnam, even for the large companies, not a lot of companies that doing research on advanced technology. So even for the young people who go work at a larger technology companies in Vietnam, I don't think they get much access to things like machine learning or AI's technologies. So it's very hard to have an innovation on those technologies if you are not familiar with the current state of the technologies. Another factor is that Vietnam does have people who research on advanced technologies, especially in terms of agriculture. But they are scientists and researchers, and the technologies or the new innovation that they have can really benefit. The problem is researchers and scientists that we talk to, they have very little desire to start a company to commercialize the product. And I think in order to help commercialize these technologies, the investors in Vietnam also need to be more sophisticated. If we have the product, we have to have a platform to launch and commercialize the products. And currently, I don't think Vietnamese investors is at that level yet.
In order to provide management and marketing technology solutions for 0 to 2-star hotels, ezCloud has visited various hotels to find out their demands. This task was done in the span of several months, thanks to support from Key Startup, a company specializing in business development services or BDS for startups.
Bên mình là những người làm công nghệ. Bên mình có thể rất là giỏi về công nghệ, nhưng mà cái việc tìm hiểu thị trường, đánh giá nhu cầu thị trường và tìm hiểu những vấn đề của thị trường cần thì là một kỹ năng, nó không phải kỹ năng về công nghệ nữa. Cái startup định hình cho mình cách chúng ta tư duy về bán hàng, tư duy về nhu cầu thị trường.
Nếu mà bắt họ chi khoảng tầm vài nghìn đô cho một cái dịch vụ nghiên cứu thị trường thông thường thì sẽ rất là khó. Nhưng thay vào đó chúng ta có thể hướng dẫn họ bằng sức lực và tài năng của họ. Họ sẽ tính toán được cái quy mô thị trường tiềm năng cho cái sản phẩm dịch vụ đó.
According to experts, a number of startups have not become real enterprises, but are more of groups that look for and test innovative business models. As a result, they need specialized business development services that can help them enhance capacity in terms of business networks, market opportunities, intellectual property, and business conditions. In recent years, the fast-growing startup community in Vietnam has stepped up demands for these services.
Các doanh nghiệp thì cũng đang rất là muốn nhanh nhẹn để đáp ứng cái nhu cầu đấy. Tuy nhiên là họ chưa có sự tìm hiểu kỹ về nhu cầu của startup. Do đó thì cái việc đáp ứng tôi nghĩ là nó vẫn đang dừng lại ở mức độ rất là vừa phải. Hiện nay thì cái ngành mà được outsourcing nhiều nhất vẫn chỉ là kế toán tài chính, dịch vụ liên quan tài chính thôi. Chứ còn những cái dịch vụ khác là hiện nay đang rất là khó và chi phí rất cao.
What do you think about the development of the business development services for startups in Vietnam so far?
Startup communities get a lot of attention right now, but most of the hub is coming from corporate responsibility, social responsibility part of the companies. And CSR in Vietnam, I don't think it's a strong conscience. There's a lot of law firms who want to help the startups, but it's not always lead to a concrete result, because setting up a startup is different from setting up a normal SME, and a lot of the law firms in Vietnam, they are very comfortable with the procedure of setting up an SME, but to help setting up a startup, they will need to do research and need to relearn how to set up a startup, even though the law is always there, and not a lot of law firms willing to do that, because startup doesn't have money to pay for the service.
In 2018, how do you think the business development services will develop?
In 2018, it's a very short time frame, so I don't think there will be any drastic change will happen. But over time, over the course of, I think, a couple of years in the future, BDS can play a very big role in helping startups, because let's say a law firms, a lawyers who will be able to help startup with opening several companies fast and quickly. But another advantage of them is that they not only work with startup, they also work with investors. So lawyers can also play as a deal maker for startups, and that happens a lot in more developed ecosystem.
Okay. Now, how would supporting policies and assistance for startups, particularly those specified in the law on supporting SMEs, can be more applicable to Vietnamese startups?
To have all the legislation and all the laws relating to startups and venture capitals to be in the same law. So people who want to do startup or want to open a venture capital to invest, they have more efficient times in researching the law. There's new section in the SME laws regarding startup and venture capitals. I think that is a very good thing. So right now it's still a very small section in the law, but the government now acknowledge that startup is different from SME. And when we acknowledge that startup is different from SME, then we can look at how we can support them more specialized. And I think the actual laws will come into the futures, but that's the first step. Second thing is setting up a companies and closing down companies should be quick and easy for both the investors and the founders of the startup. In terms of venture capitals, we just have a new addition to the SME laws that allow the type of venture capitals to work in Vietnam. That is a very big change compared to the past, but it's not enough to either attract more people in Vietnam to open their own venture capitals or international venture capitals to come into Vietnam and set up their operation here. Because startup in Vietnam right now, they have more easier time to raise early stage funds in Vietnam, but because they have to work with Singaporeans or Korean venture capitals for the next rounds. So most of the technology companies in Vietnam, the bigger one, like 20 million valuation, 30 million valuation, I think most of them or all of them are actually Singaporean legal entities, because to attract the investors, what the investor asks is that they are not familiar with the Vietnam legal framework, and they are not willing to do much research because it's very complicated, so they cannot really trust in the framework. So if the startup want to raise fund, go to Singapore, open a new entities, and the funds will go to the new entities, and that Singaporean entities come back and buy the Vietnamese companies.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Currently, the Vietnamese startup community only has about 1,800 businesses, a modest figure in the whole economy. But this community has attracted a lot of public attention in recent years. Startup is a growing trend, and business development services for startup are also inevitable. After a boom in the number of new enterprises last year, business development services are expected to become more specialized to better accommodate demands of businesses in 2018. Let's see what changes will come. And that's the end of our program. In the meantime, you can also log on to vtv4.vn, our YouTube channel at VTV4Go, for more of our programs and updates. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode of Bizline. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.